It's the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David talks to sculptor Kwame Akoto-Bamfo. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome to everyone at home, and I would normally say our studio audience to the weekly show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. I say normally, as we usually shoot the show before a small studio audience at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. But we are still in the last few weeks of shooting from home due to coronavirus concerns. In fact, this is just a green screen. Hey, Marty, can you put me on Safari? So, a new study finds that Facebook likes predicts one's personality. Turns out there are only two personality traits, stalker or mom. And Statista has reported that 184 billion smartphone apps will have been downloaded by the year 2024. That makes sense, being as we're all still waiting for 120 billion apps to finish downloading from 2017. Speaking of smartphones, a new survey has revealed that 10% of people admit to checking their phones during sex. That seems fairly unbelievable. I mean, what is so important that it can't wait 2 minutes? Oh, and did you hear this? McDonald's is now testing fully automated drive-through service. Engineers say once that technology has been perfected, they'll see if they can make ice cream machines work. Let's see, dozens of escaped sheep just overran a neighborhood in Coalinga, California. The exact number of escaped sheep is unknown because residents who tried to count them kept falling asleep. Wolf Eye Clinic was just the target of a cyber attack that may impact up to 500,000 patients. I'm kind of angry about this. It's an incredible breach of my privacy that some hacker now knows I wear reading glasses I literally wear on my face. Lastly, the World Health Organization has formally announced dogs cannot contract COVID-19. As a result, dogs previously required to quarantine can now be released. So, to be absolutely clear, who let the dogs out? On our show tonight, we've got a sculptor whose work has been lauded across the world for its beauty and its message. His first major installment in America, Nkyinkyim, was placed in the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama. And his new work, titled Blank Slate, well, it's scheduled to start touring the States this year, making stops in cities with powerful civil rights history across the country. So, here with us tonight is sculptor Kwame Akoto-Bamfo. So, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Our featured guest tonight has found a way to tell powerful and important stories through his art. His sculptures and installations have captured the hearts and minds of people across the world, from Ghana to nearby Montgomery, Alabama. Known for his famous installation Nkyinkyim in Montgomery, now he's about to start a tour with his new work, Blank Slate. Please give a warm weekly show welcome to sculptor Kwame Akoto-Bamfo. Kwame, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David.
So your work came to my attention because of your amazing Nkyinkyim installation in Montgomery, Alabama, which is not too far from where we have this show. But I didn't know much about you personally. Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Accra, Ghana, West Africa. And I only came to the U.S. Since 2019. Oh, wow. So what was family like back there in Ghana? Well, family was very communal. I think that I had a lot of experience between the 80s and 90s, and there was no internet, and you get to share television. The whole neighborhood gets to share television, and you're not only raised by your family, but everybody else that lives close or around you. So everybody is responsible for checking you. It was an unspoken, code, or it was an unspoken community code.
So you've obviously blossomed into this amazing artist and sculptor. Were either of your parents or any of your siblings artistic? I mean, where did that spark come from?
I think most of my family have been creative, not necessarily visual artists, but I have my siblings are either into culinary arts or writing. So most of them are creative, yes.
So we were talking, I mentioned the installation Nkyinkyim, but what was the first thing you ever sculpted? And what was that about? What was the subject matter of that?
The very first thing I sculpted, I think it was a sand igloo. Because I was sculpting around 3.
Oh, wow.
Age. I actually didn't know my age then, but my mom says I was age 3, and I think I'm going to take that. So what you would do was to stick your leg into some wet sand, and then you create an igloo around it. And then I found myself being more creative with it. So it was something that we all used to do as kids. But before I realized, I was making faces in the sand. I was drawing various animal shapes in the sand as well.
So there's a lot of different subjects you could have chosen to be the focus of your art. What made you choose slavery, or do you go ahead? Yeah, let's go with that question first, I guess.
Yeah. Number one, I wanted to know about myself through my ancestors. I wanted to learn. I believe that I could and I can project the kind of person I'm going to be and the kind of person that my children are going to probably be if I knew I can plot the path between my current position in the space-time continuum and then my ancestors. And so I didn't necessarily jump at African enslavement. It rather jumped at me through what I was learning through my ancestors. So in history and being a Black person and an African, there was no escaping that subject on African enslavement. And I've been raised in such a way that I do love problem solving, and I have a passion for healing and trying to make things better in any little way that I can. So initially, I wanted to tackle that traumatic matter about African enslavement with the hope that I will move on, and tackle other subjects in African history and about African heritage. But the more that I learned about this topic, the more I stayed with the subject, because I realized it wasn't about me anymore. It was about community, and the community being Africans in the African diaspora, Africans all over the world.
Well, one thing that's interesting about the way that Americans are introduced to slavery in the educational system now and how it's taught, it may be very different how some students in some schools are taught versus others. And it may be very different how they're taught based on whether their school is predominantly African American or predominantly Caucasian. When you were growing up, there was obviously you had to have some introduction to the history of slavery. How was it taught to you in your schools?
African enslaved, Ghana is only 60 years old, 64 years. My mother is 64. So we, having been so far from the colonial era and then the colonial influence, and pretty much like most West African or African countries, most countries are barely 70 years old, And whilst the colonialism, as we thought we knew, had ended, there still is the existence of neo-colonial influence, because in Ghana, one of the dialogues that came up in 2021, that's this year, was about whether students can wear their hair, natural. Male students can wear dreadlocks to school or not. And even it took Ghana to dialogue for this boy. It had to even get to high court before this boy was allowed to go to school as a Rastafari person. So the point I want to make is that the colonial influence is still there and is subtle, and as such, and because of that, teaching about slavery in schools is really subtle. They only mention it, and they don't really talk about how it affects us as Africans in this current times.
Kwame, we've got to go to a quick commercial break, pay the bills. Can you stick around till after the commercials?
Yeah, absolutely.
In various religions and faiths throughout time and across cultures, monuments have been important. And you mentioned something earlier about spiritual when we were talking about your art. Do you see your sculptures or monuments in kind of a spiritual way?
I think personally, I consider it as I am writing my book, The Art of Healing. And in the introduction, I talk about me seeing my work as my path to salvation. So yes, it is spiritual. It's not necessarily religious, but it is very spiritual for me and for a lot of people who've been had the opportunity to work with me and then to experience my work. In Ghana, my work is being made into a museum in Ada. And so far, we've started getting pilgrimages. We've started having people come to my space as pilgrimage and to look for the opportunity to connect with the culture through my work, the history and then the culture through the work that I do in Ghana. Yeah.
Do you think there's maybe a fear of maybe some of that culture or history being lost as time passes and more of the elders pass away?
Yes, there is that fear. It's also my own personal fear. And so part of my work and my wish is to record as much as I can before some of the elders leave. I've seen at least 3-4 elders, highly traditionally educated elders, leave in my lifetime. And I'm hoping to help with the preservation of our tangible and intangible cultural heritage.
Is there something that you would want your fellow, is it Ghanaians? Would that be the proper way of pronouncing it? To remember based on your work?
Yes, there is a lot. My work in Nkyinkyim especially pays homage to Akan traditions, Akan traditional rites of commemorating the dead. But the practice is not only for the Akan. In fact, the Akan are about 20 million spread across the coast of West Africa. But then the funerary rites and the art of making portraits in commemoration to the dead is not unique to Ghanaian Akan and Ghanaian culture. It's something that is shared. It's a belief system and it's a right that is shared by most African countries, and I believe most Africans in the African diaspora.
So would you say that your sculptures are probably kind of a way of helping us remember, perhaps maybe even in a more permanent way?
Yes, my sculpture and what it represents borrows from what was done by those before me, traditional artists and healers before me. And I hope that it becomes a beacon to healing. It becomes a medium through which people can heal. And healing being not only from the trauma of the transatlantic slave trade, but then the trauma of being ripped away from our culture and being ripped away from our history.
When you work with such important subject matter, do you feel more pressure to get it right?
Yes. My new work, the Blank Slate monument, has to do with the American experience. And it's directly connected to African enslavement, to Nkyinkyim that I've been working on. And there is that pressure because, again, like I said, I've come to know, at least for about 7 years now. It's been 11 years since I started working on Nkyinkyim, and I have come to be very conscious about the fact that African enslavement, especially on the scale that I am tackling it, has not got to do with my own personal feelings, but also about the feelings of Africans on the continent and Black people all over the world.
So tell us about what I consider your breakout sculptures here in the States, Nkyinkyim installation in Montgomery, Alabama. How did that opportunity come about to begin with?
Well, EJI reached out to me in 2017, around 2017, and this was through the vision of Brian Stevenson. In fact, since I contributed to the Lynching Museum in Alabama, Brian has been consistent in supporting my work and my vision as well. I think that to some extent we don't talk on an everyday basis, but whenever we do get to work, there is some sort of mentorship and guidance, because Brian is also a great visionary in his own right, and so I've learned a lot passively through the contact.
So what was the idea behind Nkyinkyim itself from your point of view? I mean, what did you specifically want to show?
I want to show, and it's still what I am doing. That's why my work is being expanded into a museum. I want to show African heritage and African history from a holistic, a more panoramic point of view, either than African enslavement. But my approach as an educator, my approach was to tackle the bull by its horns. So my approach was African enslavement, transatlantic slavery, Arab slavery, racism has been that big elephant in the room when you're talking about African history and when you're talking about the living experience of Africans right now. And I know I'm not going to grow younger, so I thought that tackle the most difficult aspects when you are young, and when you can take all of this, when you don't have at the time I didn't have a wife, and now I'm going to be a father very soon.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
You've got a tour coming up called the Blank Slate, Hope for a New America. The sculpture itself is breathtaking. What started this new project for you?
The Blank Slate is about the American experience. I have come to learn passively, not as somebody who's lived it, but as I've come to learn. It's a natural following. It's a natural progression to the story that I want to tell, and to the story that I'm telling, or to the narrative that I've become a part of. And naturally, after tracing African enslavement and then the history behind it, I have been, even before I officially announced this work, I have been interested in the history after Africans left the continent or were ripped off from their loved ones from the continent, and then what is happening in their current lives. Because, like I said, my work is about healing. And if you are going to tackle healing, you have to also tackle things in present times. Our people need healing from various aspects of their lives. So not only about African enslavement, but the effects and then the legacy that the enslavement has brought. We need economic healing, psychological, cultural, emotional, all sorts of healing. And a Blank Slate is for me, is an opportunity to tap into activism of this present time, to tap into and contribute to healing that is needed in my time, in my lifetime, and to continue a tradition that has been started before me, and to have my work play a role, not only in the past of something that has occurred in the past, but to play a role now. I'm greatly inspired by the work of Brian Stevenson and his vision at EJI's museum. Brian's technique, not as he has told me, but as I have observed, is, yes, he's talking about mass incarceration, and yes, he's talking about racial justice. Yes, he's brought me to contribute the aspect and then the connection to Africa. But he is also on a daily basis trying to get people, who've been wrongfully incarcerated. That is what I believe. That's the inspiration right there, to have your work be not only influential in a bygone era, but to have your work pragmatic and necessary in our current times. I believe that is the largest inspiration that I can ever talk about.
So where can our audience go to follow along with your work and potentially catch the tour dates for Blank Slate?
They can visit on social media, Blank Slate Monument on Instagram and on Facebook. There's also a website, www.blankslatemonument.com. My own personal page is Osramba Media on Instagram. It's OSRANBA _MEDIA. And they can follow the progress of the Blank Slate and then my work in total from there.
Kwame, thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Kwame Akoto-Bamfo.
Thank you, David. Thank you for being great. Thank you for asking the right questions. Thank you for probing. And thank you for doing this. It's really important. And very often the words that come out is only as good as the person who is asking them.
Well, I appreciate that. That's high praise. Thank you for joining us. That is our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to Kwame Akoto-Bamfo for joining us. Taking us home tonight, still filling in for our house band, the Mojiles, is my son, Gianni.